What's up, everyone? Carmen here with Pittsburgh White Shorts, bringing you another deck tech. There's been a lot of talk out there about sharks and skeletons and integrity knights, and I'm sick of it. I want to talk about something cool. I want to talk about something interesting. I want to talk about a deck that I actually like, both to play and play against. I want to talk about Two Soul Bar Arifureta. If I had this deck in my hands right now for English, I think this is what I would be bringing to regionals. I'm a really big believer in this deck. It has a very unique strategy by being, just Two Soul Bar. There's a lot more to it than it seems. And just looking at it, you're probably raising some eyebrows already. This deck has 26 level 0s. Very lean level 1 lineup, only one level 2, and then our finishing package here, Two Soul Bar. Very interesting list. The base level is, yes, you are flaming Two Soul. You are playing a Two Soul aggressive deck, but there's a lot more to it than that. So let's break down the individual cards. First up, we got this Hajime on play. From hand, gets 1500 power, so he's 3k. And then on play and on death, you can pay one, punch yourself from top of deck, and grab any level character from your waiting room. The fact that this can grab anything at a dual timing is actually really good on our finishing turn as well as early. You can play this down going first, get a plus when it dies on your first turn, and then later in the game, be able to get 2 pluses off this at level 0 for a single card. Dual timing is inherently very powerful. This card also has classmate trait, very important. We are running heavy counts of all cards, but of course we would play 4 counts of our plussing card, and I will get to that when we get to the relevant card. But you're going to see a lot of slammed 4-ofs of cards that you might not typically see, so just hang in there with me. All will be explained. 4 of this on reverse memory drop search. So when this gets when this is placed on the station of your hand, it's a pay 1, ditch 1 search. So on play search, and then when it gets reversed, it goes to memory. This card must be in your memory for your level 1 combo to function at all. So we play 4 of it to make sure we see it. Thankfully, we can get the plus or not plus, but filter on play, and then the memory is just when it dies. So we can puke out multiple copies of it. Hopefully our opponent doesn't have any bombs or any ways to deny this, but you will crash it if you need to. Thankfully, on your level 1 turn, you could crash this because it is small. The Two Soul isn't giving any additional power, so you could crash this and maybe your opponent's oversized if you had to on your level 1 turn to then kick your UA level 1 combos in your other lane. 4 climax swaps. This is a sack climax swap, so on play, you discard a climax and sack one of your other characters to, swap your climax from grave. The sack is very interesting. We do have ways to kick cards like the Hajime, so we can get that plus off of it. If maybe this card lived or you played this card down from hand, you get 2 pluses on the same turn. We are going to have a lot of stock in this deck, so the fact that this UA can save us stock while kicking other cards that give us stock outs gives us a lot of very unique plays. But overall, we're just playing 4 of it because it's a climax swap. We need to be able to switch back into our Two Soul when we trigger bar, because we need to just go off every single turn. If we're not presenting the threat of our opponent possibly eating a large chunk in the early game, I'm talking like from 0 into 1 going into early level 2, stuff like that, the early parts of the game, the deck's not really doing much at all. So this is a necessity, as well as another card that helps us dig into our deck to find climax. 4 brainstorms. 4 brainstorms because not only is this our primary brainstorm, which is the salvage brainstorm here, salvage, but it is also our healer. This also has pay to tap this heal. We are going to generate a ton of extra stock. The fact that this card cleanly pays 2, along with another card we're going to look at in a second, is very important. This card also has classmate trait, and multiples are going to be extremely important for the next card we're going to look at here. But this is going to be our primary way that we heal. The fact that we can do it early, the fact that we're stock charging very heavily early, the fact that this card pays down exactly to move us down to another notch of where UA may have stocked cards, gonna explain that in a second, is also very strong, as well as being able to elongate the game, because when our game plan goes off, our opponent cancels, we get super duper compressed and we can start grinding out the game if we want. And this card's a big reason that we can do that, because we're generating resources, paying them out to heal, and going infinite that way. So the most important card in the deck, this Shii. So this is when you trigger a climax, any of your characters trigger a climax, you can discard a climax, specifically a climax, to look at up to the top 2 cards of your deck, choose a card from among them, add it to hand, and send the rest to waiting room. We are only on 4 bar, so this doesn't happen too often, but if we have errant extra climaxes in hand when we trigger a Two Soul or something like that, if we are flooding, we can get them out of our hand there. You would like to hold a climax, any climax in your hand, so that you can ensure that you can play on the next turn. But if you do need to filter, that option is there. The top 2 filter isn't that great, but the most important part of this card is the second half. Pay to ditch a tortoise character. Every character in the deck is tortoise. There's some other trait fuckery with classmate and teacher, but tortoise is common amongst all cards. So pay to discard a character and rest this. Choose a character in your waiting room, add it to hand. Choose a character in your waiting room with the same name as the added card, add it to hand. So for pay to ditch a character, you can salvage 2, plussing 1 overall, but 2 of the exact same card. Because we must salvage 2 of the exact same card, that is why we are running weird, over-bloated, quote-unquote, counts of a lot of these cards, because we need to make sure that we can pick up, if we only need 1 of a card, pick up 2 of it. But the fact that this card picks up 2, and the fact that this card pays 2, is very important when you're thinking about the UA combo. The UA combo selectively stocks 2 cards when your opponent cancels. So your stock 2 cards, this is pay 2, ditch a card, salvage 2. You see where I'm going with this? Not only is the UA plussing off the top of your deck, the UA is selectively salvaging new cards on later turns that you set up yourself with your UA. So remembering where you're stocking cards with your UA is very important to playing this deck effectively. And it's part of the reason why I think this deck is so cool. You look at it at the start and you just say, this is just a dumb, stupid 2-soul deck. All you do is just jam the 2-soul in your opponent's face and see if it sticks. And if they don't, then you build resources. But this deck can be played a lot more intelligently than that. 2-soul with big numbers, you can set up a lot of side attacks. There's lingering level 1s and 2s in the meta right now. Every time, ever since standby became a thing, that's something you can count on. Alice, of course, a level 2. You can side that for 1, side it for 2 with a trigger, things like that. There are definitely ways that you can finesse the extra soul into better numbers later after your opponent, gets through their first refresh, and those coin flips for 3 and 4 probably aren't going to stick anymore. And then when your opponent still, maybe cancels that like they should, in a normal game, you're still generating a ton of resources, and then this card is selectively adding you part of that other resource, back into your hand. So this is like that card that turns your stock into immediate hand, and this is selective, unlike something like Union, which was ripping cards off the top of your deck. The whole thing with Bunny Girl Union was that she gave you that guaranteed stock. The guaranteed stock was as good as a card because you could always tap down the resonator the following turn. This is kind of similar. Whenever your opponent cancels, you're getting, a +2 with the stock, like over the course of the turn cycle. So this Shii is really, really strong. It's really, really powerful, and using this card intelligently is a big part of what can make this deck so scary, especially when you get to the end game. We're playing 4 because we not only want to see it, we might want to actually pick up this card later at other parts during the game to, on our finisher turn, resolve this card multiple times to get multiple dupe copies to go off, and I'll explain that when we get to our level 3s. Last 4 of here at 0 is Ico. So she is on play, hand to stock if you'd like. The fact that you can, hand to stock something to then pay 2 if you're trying to manipulate where your pay 2s go down to pay out specifically with your Shia to a dupe that you've stocked on a previous turn can be important. Definitely another finessable effect, as well as, just randomly extending your reach. This card also has on play, you can choose a character, put it into clock, look it up the top 4, and choose any card from among them. This is how we are going to dig for climax if we don't have it in the early game. You will punch yourself and expend your hand to find that 2-soul, because you must go off or your deck is not doing really anything at all. You will resolve this as many times as necessary to make sure that you have your climax so that you can slam it and go off the next turn, or on that turn if you must. This card also has teacher trait. Classmate and teacher is going to be important as we get into our tech cards. They are also blue and require you to have classmate and or teacher cards on the board. So the fact that this card has teacher trait, along with the Hajime, which has classmate, and the brainstorm, which also has classmate, is important for meeting those thresholds, so you need to resolve those effects. But this primarily is going to be a way to turbo through our early deck. Hopefully our opponent, cancels at least 1, so UA's milling a little bit. This is our other mill that's outside of our climax combo, as well as digging us into our climax. And lastly, here at level 0 is this kind of funky drop search. So you can discard a card, and send this to the bottom of your deck to search your deck for a character, show it to your opponent, add to your hand, shuffle your deck. We are playing 2 so that we could pick up 2 of this card to exchange it and rip cards out of our deck if necessary. The fact that you send this card to bottom, then search and shuffle for cost means you will never be able to set it on the bottom for any reason. It's just going to return back to deck and then shuffle up. But yeah, just a little bit of deck access since our Brainstorm is salvage and the Shii is salvage. So moving into level 1, the UA, the star of the show. When this card's damage is canceled, you may return this to your hand. This card is inherent plus outside of its climax combo ability. The climax combo you don't even need to play a climax or the right climax for this card to potentially pop itself back to hand. For that effect and for having a soul trigger, this card is a 1/03k that gains no additional power. Keep that in mind. This card will pretty much always lose board. Climax combo memory. This ability can only activate up to once per turn when this card's damage is canceled. If you have the 2 soul in your climax area and you have that TDUA in your memory, you can choose up to 2 characters in your waiting room, put them into stock at any order, and then look at up to the top 4 cards of your deck, choose a character from among them, show it to your opponent, add to your hand, ditch the rest. So if your opponent cancels damage, this card pluses 2 by popping itself back up to hand, and then adding a card from the top 4 of your deck to your hand. And then by stocking 2 on the following turn with the Shii, it pluses again. So this card actually goes +3 if you use it in combination with Shii. Again, because this card selectively stocks 2 cards, you can finesse that in whatever way you would like in order to pay out with the Shii to get exactly the cards you need on following turns. You're trying to hit very specific things for going into your end game, very specific multiples. So stocking those and then knowing where they are, kind of similar to how TRV would kind of stock its Kids Meal Mikey somewhere around the 5th or 6th card, but would always be there when they pay out for their combo turn, things like that nature. You're hiding cards in stock to be paid out then for later use. It's a little bit of a memory game, a little bit of remembering overhead, but the fact that you can do this kind of stuff just kind of adds to that skill ceiling of the deck, a deck that would otherwise, again, seem kind of unga bunga, kind of stupid, kind of pants on head, but there's a lot more lines here, and the UA selectively stocking 2, and the Shii being able to then immediately pick those cards up is a big reason why. And of course, this card's popping back to hand when your opponent cancels. It's a self loop. So if only one of these gets canceled, right, because you have this card in your hand, you can immediately just rip the other 2 back, provided, you have a way to stay out of deck, or you have the ability to stock the other one and then discard it for cost, then pick up the other 2. But you have ways to always, loop this back, provided at least one of these gets canceled. And then if your opponent just eats 9 straight, your top end is actually so lean, which is part of like the way that this deck actually works better than other decks who have tried this in the past. The top end is actually so lean in terms of stock, which is like the resource that you get gated on most often when the game goes fast. Because that's so lean in the stock department, you can actually still threaten for finishes when your opponent just eats it. You don't generate any resource, which is really nice. But yep, this card's got a lot going on, but it's just a massive plussing machine if your opponent cancels. Then if your opponent eats it, you're ahead. That is the general idea. And again, because this card has a soul trigger, your soul trigger count is higher than maybe you'd think for playing 26 level 0s. So you do have the ability to side over things like, you're siding over for 1 or 2, things like that, or you trigger a crit and you side over for 3, or against something like Alice, it's a level 2. You have the ability to kind of keep this out with a side attack if you need to make sure that you can go loop again the next turn. Getting into the teacher classmate Floodgate cards, there's 2 of these in here. Well, not really floodgates, but just sort of tech, deck break and things like that cards. So if you have 2 or more other classmate or teacher characters, you cannot take pings from your opponents at all. Onboard effect. So anti-ping Floodgate, pretty nice, again, specific matchup card. And then it also has the really powerful climax filter effect, where whenever you trigger a climax, you can discard a climax to salvage anything instantly. So you trigger a bar, you ditch it, and you salvage. Basically turns your bar into a door that comes to your hand and doesn't get stuck in stock. Hopefully you don't blind stock something. But this is basically in the deck as just a fact that Arifureta has it. They have this Floodgate available that you can't take pings if it's relevant in that matchup. You slam this down. Again, your Brainstorm is classmate, so you only need to have 1 other character on the board that fulfills the classmate condition. If this is a card that wins you the matchup or makes your opponent's life hell, it is easy for you with the 2 soul to side something with even a level 0 in the front row to make sure that you fulfill that classmate condition, so that your opponent cannot ping you on the the following turn. If it's important, you play it, but otherwise, you know, it's just another teacher classmate card to fulfill the condition for this card. So this is the big one. This is another Ico that is a Fumio. This deck also has access to stock swap, spoiler alert. So the fact that we can play stock swap and Fumio in the deck, despite this card having a pretty hefty cost for us, you have to have 4 or more other classmate or teacher characters on board. So you have to have the full board of classmate teacher. So this card's classmate teacher, the card we just looked at is classmate teacher, the card that, you know, you clock yourself, check top 4, this other Ico, the brainstorm is classmate teacher, as well as the Hajime. The best way for you to go into this on your finisher turn is actually going to be with the Hajime. You can use the Shii to pick up 2 Hajimes. This is definitely a deck where if you don't kill your opponent on your finisher turn, your game is over. So you will freely, you know, punch yourself with the Hajime if you can to, you know, fulfill that card. So you're not running out of cards. You also need cards in hand to go off with your finisher. So you can use the Hajime to refill your hands at the cost of your life. Again, if you don't kill your opponent on your turn, your game's pretty much over, so you don't really care in those situations. But if your opponent has handed you a line where stock swap Fumio just completely murders them, stock swap Fumio being an extremely powerful combination of deck break effects, you will happily punch yourself multiple times and ensure that you can resolve this and then resolve the Shii stock swap, or resolve the Shii stock swap and then resolve this, dumping all of your opponent's clean stock back into their deck. Again, stock swap Fumio, always extremely powerful, even if you never resolve it. The fact that this is in your deck and you could do it because your deck builds so much resources like crazy so quickly. If your opponent cancels and your opponent's in that like, oh, I'm canceling, I'm building stock, I'm never gonna die, he's slamming 2 soul, he can't deal any damage to me, I'm just gonna sit here and stock and press and my opponent's never gonna be able to do anything. The fact that this plus stock swap is in your deck, no matter how expensive it may be, because this card builds you so many resources, because this Shii can rip the exact cards that you need, you can actually resolve this and then stock swap and then go off with your combo. It sounds insane, but the fact that this card just vomits so many resources for you if your opponent cancels, this plus the stock swap is your answer to your opponent's like good games where they're rolling. You can actually just like completely deck break them, 360 no scope them, and just kill them. Here's the stock swap. We're playing 2 specifically because it is more important for us to have just the stock swap. Stock swap by itself is a lot more threatening than just Fumio, so we play 2 to make sure that we can grab it off of our Shii if need be. It also has on play, all of your opponent's front row characters gives minus 2,000 power. Really nice because we're playing a restand or finisher. If we do have to front into stuff, we don't want to worry about something like memory kick counter. This helps us play around that. And then for the actual stock swap effect, the cost is discard 2. Sounds a little rough, but we want to, you know, keep stock to use for our next card that we're going to look at to, you know, help our finisher get a little bit more push. So the fact that we can discard 2 cards, you know, we probably, if we had to pick this up with the Shii, we had to grab an extra copy so we can get that out of our hand, maybe get another card out of our hand that we can then use another Shii to pick up another 2. The fact that it discards cards is a little bit more synergistic than it might seem. And it is a real stock swap. You know, your opponent does wipe their stock and then put it back. Those cards go to grave, unlike some of the other stuff we've seen and stuff like Risk Recoil, where they have these fake stock swaps that stock swap back to deck and rip them out, and they don't really do a lot. This is a real stock swap and a real Fumio for 1, so you can just completely murder your opponent's games where they're canceling a lot, and if your opponent's canceling a lot, you're building a lot of resources with the UA. So you have a definitely insane threatening finishing power on both ends. And you think, well, the finishing power is mostly just from the 2 soul, right? Wrong, because when we build all these resources, we can use this card. So this is the UA early play. This is the SR art. I have the SR art here so that this channel doesn't get nuked from existence, because the art on the normal UA is inappropriate, but this is an early play. If you have 4 or more characters on board, you almost never early play this card. It's like useless. Maybe you do it if you need to pay out a triggered climax and you don't have cards you need to pick up for later with Shii, but that's usually a pretty rare case. You usually always have cards you want to pick up with Shii. So, and then she also gets 500 power for each of the other characters, so she's a 10-5. And then the most important part, when she's played from hand, you choose the Hajime from your waiting room, slam it underneath this card as a marker, and you burn your opponent for 1. This is a main phase burn. We we are generating a ton of stock and resources. This Shii rips back cards in multiples. What do you think we're going to do with this card? We're going to play this card down. We're going to get the marker. We're going to burn our opponent for 1. We're going to play another one. We're going to play over them with other cards. Then we're going to tap down the Shii, get them back, and then we're going to do it again. That sounds ridiculous, and that sounds like you'd never have enough resources to do this, and that like I'm lying to you and this is impossible. But like in the games where your opponent is canceling like even a reasonable amount and you're having a normal game, UA generates you like something like ridiculous, like 12 or 14 stock. It's absolutely insane. So you can actually resolve this ping in main phase like 3, 4, sometimes 5 times, like then stock swap, then go off with your finisher, because this card also spawns cards. So for your last ping here, right, our finisher on play, you choose a character from your hand is levels equal to your level, put it on stage in any slot, and then this turn that card gets 2,000 power. So on only does that help you play around stuff like memory kick, because you know you want our card that we spawn to be big, so that we don't get memory kicked by our opponent when we're restanding. But you can play this, have this spawn another restander, have that restander, the last restander in the last lane for your third one, spawn the last UA, so you get another burn for free. And the fact that we're constantly playing over and recycling the Hajime, and again we're playing over the Hajime and stuff like that, we can use that to get another plus if we're running low on the hand portion, fuel the hand part. The fact that we don't really care about our life, and if we don't kill our opponent this turn, we're basically losing anyway, it means that we can freely punch ourselves to grab characters on every level, both when we slam down the Hajime to get it into the grave, as well as when we play over it, things of that nature. But the combo itself is actually very simple. It's at the end of this card's attack, pay 3, discard 1 if you have the bar, and as long as you have 2 or more other characters, stand this card back up. Sounds a lot more expensive than it is, but you don't need that much floating going into your finisher turn to have this go full triple combo, attack 6 times, because this activates the end of the attack and is mostly stock gated, as well as this card spawning its stealth. Stock is the one resource you will have a ton of because of the UA, and if your opponent is having one of those games where they just eat everything and you are like also, because you only generate resources when your opponent cancels, when you have games like that, the fact that Shii just shits out another copy of itself and then shits out like a copy of this for a free burn in those games where like you have no resources, you got no hand, you have no stock, you can still probably double combo plus a ping in a game where your opponent has just eaten everything and has been struggling to stabilize. That is usually enough to get you there, even in those games. So the games where you're rolling, you have disgusting stuff like stock swap Fumio, pinging a bunch of million times in main phase, and then after that attacking 6 times with restand, and after you know all game you've been slamming 2 souls your opponent, trying to just force big damage through, can be really disgusting. Those lines at the top are actually not very easy. I've explained a lot of them. A lot of it has to do with this Shii right here, picking up cards in multiples, and the UA selectively stocking cards throughout the game. You're going to have to play the memory game to remember where you have stocked multiples of cards, rip them out at exact times with the Shii, to then loop cards like the UA early play for the extra pings, then going into either, you know, like stock swap if you need to, and then into your Shii restand finisher. You can push a ton of instances of damage. I've had games where I have, again, like 3, 4, 5 pings in main phase, stock swap my opponent, then triple combo with Shii. It's absolutely nuts. I have, you know, had games where I've successfully, my opponent's like, there's no way you can resolve Fumio and stock swap and still do your combo, where they play the chicken game with you that way, and you get them, you win those games because it is easier for you to resolve the Fumio than anybody gives you credit for, provided you're, you know, willing to punch yourself in the face a couple times with Hajime to get it off. But when you pull off those kinds of plays, especially when your opponent is kind of playing a chicken game with you that you won't be able to do it, you usually win those games because they're very susceptible to it at that point. But yep, that is 2 soul bar Arifureta. Again, if I had this deck in my hands right now for English, I think it would be a really fun way to kind of punch through a lot of the stuff right now that's kind of running the meta in English. Stuff like Overlord, stuff like Gura, stuff like Alice has a really insane reach finisher alongside, you know, game plan that for the most part, those decks really don't hedge their bets against too hard. Alice might build up a lot of stock, Gura might build up a lot of stock, but you have the stock swap, you have the Fumio, you have all those deck break tools. I think it would have been really cool. Unfortunately, Arifureta is probably only going to be legal in English for Worlds, I believe, with when it releases. I don't think it'll get any regionals under its belt this season, unfortunately. But because, you know, it's a pretty agnostic strategy to what's going on out in the Weiss world, I think you're definitely going to see this one in following metas. And if you have the opportunity to maybe grab the deck for cheap in JP to get a bit of pre-play with it, or maybe even try it in Weiss Fight or one of the simulators or things like that, definitely give it a try. It is a blast. You can go as monkey mode with it or as big brain with it as you want. It's a whole lot of fun to play. I will be in Chicago this upcoming weekend, and I was in Toronto past weekend, so if I saw you in Toronto, it was a great time. Glad to meet everybody, and if I will see you this weekend in Chicago at BCS, that will be awesome. Always love meeting people, always love meeting fans of the channel, always a great time. And then after Chicago, that will be the wrap on the BCS season for me, just due to scheduling and a bunch of other stuff. I know that content on the channel kind of seems like it may have been waning. September and October for us have been extremely busy, kind of rushing to get this one out if it hasn't been obvious, just because everybody's been traveling to compete, not only in Weiss Schwarz, but also in other card games. A lot of our community focusing on competing in One Piece, Pokemon, and other TCGs, and those have all been popping off alongside Weiss. So things have been very difficult to kind of wrangle with scheduling, but we are going to get back to set reviews. We have a lot of big ones scheduled coming up, including Arifureta, so definitely be on the lookout for that. And with that, Pittsburgh Weiss Schwarz signing off, and we'll see you in the next one.